Welcome to the Tax Professionals Podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping you improve your tax career. Here's your host, Jack Bonehill.
Started my tax career journey just over 5 years ago now, straight out of university. My last CTA exam was in November 2018 and I was promoted to manager at the start of October this year. This is a great milestone for me and something I'm proud of, particularly in the timescales I've done it in. But when I think about it, what I actually knew about a tax career at the start of it was well off the mark, and to be honest, I was always a bit unsure of what the journey would look like getting to manager. And I'm sure if you're at the start of your journey, or at least on your way towards manager, then maybe you're in the same boat as what I was. I definitely started with lots of misconceptions when I started my career, which I'll cover in this episode and my tips around them. So, although 5 years won't sound like a lot to some people who've been working for much longer, it is definitely a long time for me and I've learned so much in this time. This episode is all about me sharing tips from my experiences over the last 5 years on my journey to manager. And in this episode, I want to share with you some of the things I've learned along the way and some tips to help accelerate your progression towards manager. Everything said in this episode is completely based off my own opinion and experiences that I've had on my way to manager, and they are what I believe to have been significant contributors in my progression to manager. There's so many tips that I could have given in this episode, but if I was to give all of them, this episode would be exceptionally long, so I've kind of kept it down to the things that I think are the most significant and those that I would have loved to have known at the start of my tax career journey 5 years ago. So without further ado, let's get to it. So tip number 1 is that understand that whilst being technically excellent is necessary, it will only get you so far in your career. So when I first started working in tax, I thought the only contributor to my success in the career would be to literally know as much about tax and the tax rules as possible and be able to spew out those facts and that information to clients. Well, if you've been working in tax for long, you'll kind of know that that is certainly not true, and something that I quickly realised wasn't, but it was definitely a misconception that I had to start with. So why is just having technical ability not enough? Well, just giving tax rules to a client isn't actually going to be that helpful or that valuable to them. The value comes from being able to communicate rules articulately and clearly in a way that's going to be useful for a client in a commercial and practical way. A pure technical answer is not ever going to be valuable to a client, and they just want to get to a practical answer. Saying that, technical knowledge is obviously vitally important, because without tax knowledge, then you can't advise or really have a successful career in tax. It is definitely a necessary foundation to build upon. But that is exactly what it is, a foundation. Tip number 2 is a slightly controversial one, and the tip is know that you aren't actually owed anything by just being qualified. Now, I am slightly exaggerating with that one, because obviously there is some value in you having that qualification. It demonstrates that you have technical knowledge and that you understand a certain amount about tax. And I also empathise because obviously doing a professional qualification is a lot of hard work and effort, both the ATT but particularly the CTA qualification. So I can completely understand why you would feel like you're entitled to something by doing your qualification, and believe me, I felt the exact same way at the time. A qualification in itself is not really that valuable to employer though, because it's about what you actually do day to day on the job. That's where you give the value. You need the soft skills to go with the qualification. You need to actually put the knowledge and the skills you've learned in the qualification to use. That is where the value is. It's what you do with what you've learned. And also the thing is with a professional qualification is the situations that you get given in an exam are usually unlikely, at least in most circumstances, to be a complete representation of what will happen in the real world. On top of that, you only need to get 50% of an answer right. Now imagine if you did that in a client situation where you advised them, but only 50% of it was correct, and then they had a massive liability because of that. You're going to be putting your employer at risk of being sued for a pretty large number. So, although there is value in the qualification, it's what you actually do with it. So, obviously, if you are fully qualified, you can expect a little bit of a higher wage, and it will probably be easier when you're finding jobs because, particularly for some, they're going to be a prerequisite or a condition to get that job. But don't think that they are enough alone. So some things I recommend you do if you are doing a professional qualification or you have done one is understand the principles of what you're learning and be able to apply those to any situation rather than just learning by rote and being able to do an exact exam question. Understand what you are learning. On top of that, take it as an opportunity to learn skills that will actually be useful on the job. So the biggest ones that come to mind for me for that is being able to do research and use the legislation to find the answers to questions that you don't actually know the answer to already, and then being able to put that into something useful, whether it's a calculation or giving advice to a client. And also think about what you learn in the qualification and think about how you can use that at work to add value to both your employer and your clients. Tip number 3 is to embrace a specialism early on in your career. So when I first started working in tax, I kind of fell into employment taxes by chance. It wasn't really the area of tax I was looking to work in. I was just applying for general tax jobs, and to be honest, I didn't fully appreciate the different specialisms at the time. And then on top of that, I also ended up falling into more of a specialism by working predominantly with businesses that work in the recruitment sector. Before I started working in tax, I wanted to experience working in lots of different areas of tax because that was something that was really put out there as a thing you could do by working for Big Four companies, for example, and some others out there. They would send you around different teams, and that sounded really interesting to me. And so by just working in employment taxes like I do and always have done, I was worried that I was going to become too specialist too young, and that would be detrimental overall to my career. And I actually considered moving specialism to VAT or even into a mixed tax role. But looking back, I was completely wrong by thinking that specialising early on is a mistake. Because if you're trying to learn a much more broad knowledge, then you're going to spread yourself too thin, and that ends up being much less valuable than specialising. I mean, have you seen how much tax legislation there is? It is impossible to know lots of different areas and be able to use that knowledge well. Generally speaking, specialising will give you a more valuable skill set and very in-depth knowledge in a particular area, which will make you more unique and more in demand than you would be if you had a broader knowledge. So specialisms are definitely good, and there are opportunities to have a specialism in a specialism. So, for example, within employment tax, you could literally just focus on advising around car benefits or something along those lines. Word of caution around that, though, is I've heard lots of stories where people have been that specialist within a specialism that they've actually lost their job when a tax rule has changed, which means that their area is no longer a thing. So make sure there's enough wiggle room within your specialism so that if there's one or two tax changes, then you're still going to have enough knowledge to be valuable. And as well as embracing a specialism, I think you should definitely embrace working within one or two sectors with your chosen specialism. That's another way that you can help build and develop a more unique skill set, because if you're used to the tax challenges that a particular sector has and not many other people do out there, that is a unique selling point for you and your skill set. So it may have taken me a few years, but I have now definitely appreciated how beneficial it is for me to have a specialism within employment taxes and then with a specialism on top of that within the recruitment sector. Embrace a specialism, embrace specialising within sectors. Tip number 4 is to create yourself a USP or unique selling point. Make your skill set and knowledge more unique and in demand, and we've already touched upon that in the specialism section, but by doing that you're going to set yourself apart from the crowd and make yourself more in demand and seen as an expert in a particular area. To create yourself a USP, think about what your strengths are and which areas of your job that you enjoy the most, and then you can work on making those skills incredibly strong and to a point where they're noticeably strong skills of yours by other people. And obviously, of course, make sure that it's valuable to the job. So for me, my USPs are technical knowledge and ability to analyse tax legislation, guidance, case law, and setting it out in a way that others can follow, and also my ability to create tax Excel sheets and write formulas within that, make calculators, do complicated calculations that are time saving and useful to others. And right at the start of my career, I didn't really appreciate that those were USPs of mine. It's only from feedback and reviews that I've had that I've realised that they are something that I am good at that other people may find more difficult, and especially when you combine those two things together, that's a pretty unique USP that I have, because I can create stuff within the employment taxes specialism for recruitment sector clients in Excel, which is super useful for them. Just to give you an idea of what I mean about having a USP which is valuable to others, in terms of the one for me, they're being valuable because my technical ability around analysing legislation, etc., has enabled me to find answers to non-straightforward questions that might not be answered by HMRC guidance or where there's a grey area. It's helped us to defend clients on a certain tax position against HMRC and win that, which otherwise may not be done. It's helped me to come up with justifications to allow clients to go down a more tax beneficial route than they otherwise might have done. And then with the Excel section, it's enabled me to make calculators and do calculations for clients very quickly, analyse their data, etc., applying that tax technical knowledge at the same time, which they don't have, to come out with something useful for them, because most clients we deal with are actually working within finance, so they have good Excel skills as well, but that extra layer of having that tax knowledge in my specialism is what makes it valuable. And to be honest, I think both of these things have become my USPs from my background in maths, because analysing rules and then setting out solutions is exactly what I did through my maths degree, and the Excel aspect of it is something that's very mathematical as well. So for me, these are both strengths of mine and the things that I enjoy doing, and you will have your own too. It's just about finding it, understanding it, and then taking advantage of it to give as much value to your employer and clients as possible. So just some other examples to throw out there. Yours could be that you are very persuasive and that you've got a strong tax knowledge, and building those two together could be good in you selling or winning work from clients, because you'll be able to explain the benefits and help them to decide that it's the right thing for them. You might be very good at clearly explaining things verbally and in writing, and that you enjoy speaking to people. So if you were all of those things, you'd be great for compliance reviews and face-to-face meetings. So you can kind of see how you can have your strengths and the things that you enjoy to create yourself a USP and set yourself out from the crowd. You might find it hard to understand and find your USP to begin with, but it's definitely worth it, and once you've found it, nurture it and take advantage of it in your career. Tip number 5 is to become a dependable and trustworthy colleague, and this may sound obvious, but it's really valuable if you can demonstrate being dependable and trustworthy to your colleagues early on, because then they can delegate something to you and leave you with responsibility for something in particular, know that it's going to get done, which is going to be a massive weight off their minds, and it opens up more of their time, which is very helpful and useful, especially when you're working with more senior people, say a partner or a senior manager. So a way to become dependable and trustworthy is to always do what is asked of you without the need to be chased or without missing deadlines and things like that. Don't act like you know the answer to something if you don't. Be honest with them. If you don't know the answer, don't give them something which turns out to be wrong, because as soon as you do that, you're going to damage that trust. Don't take shortcuts either. Don't try and do something a quick way because it's going to save you some time. Always make sure that you do things right and that the work you hand in is of a good quality, because that will build that trust and will help colleagues to know that you can be left to do tasks by yourself. And as a last one, don't be what I call a yes man. Be honest. Don't always say yes if you're asked to do something. Let them know if you've got other deadlines or other work on. That means that you can't do something within a particular time frame. In most cases, when I'm honest with someone along those lines, they will appreciate it, and it definitely helps to build that trustworthiness and dependability so that other people, other colleagues can hand you something and just allow you to get on with it and do a good job without the need for lots of their involvement and without the need for them to spend lots of time on something as well. So become a dependable and trustworthy colleague. Tip number 6 is to take control of your own professional development and don't think that someone else is going to be responsible for doing that for you. And that may sound harsh, and definitely early on in my career I used to feel like my development was the responsibility of, say, my manager, for example, or the firm I was working for, because I kind of didn't know what I didn't know and I needed the guidance, direction, etc. from those. And although they should definitely give you guidance, support and help you, the person that is ultimately going to be responsible for your own development and how your career goes is you and no one else. It did take me quite some time to realise this, and I actually found it quite difficult, especially after just passing my CTA qualification, because all the way through school, college, university, everything was so structured and you had clear direction of where you were now and where you needed to be at the end of that, i.e. getting those qualifications, getting your degree, whatever it was. But then as soon as I'd become CTA qualified, that had suddenly all gone, and there was guidance and support around me, but it was ultimately down to me to figure out what I needed to do to progress my career and then do something about it. Use the support that's there, speak to your colleagues, etc., but just know that it is ultimately down to you. I'm sure there must be other people out there that's had a similar experience to me in this regard, and because it was one of those things I found difficult, I'm actually in the process of creating a free email course to help you figure out the direction you want to take your career in, and then what you need to do to get to the end goal that you want. You will then pull this all into a professional development plan, all guided through the actions given within the course. And this will serve as something motivational and will keep you accountable to what you want to achieve, and ultimately will help you move towards that end goal that you want more quickly than you would do if you hadn't created yourself such a plan and you hadn't thought about that direction that you wanted to move your career in. I'm hoping it's going to come out at the start of December, but if you head on over to the taxprofessionalspodcast.com/subscribe and subscribe to email notifications if you haven't done already, then you will get a notification when that goes live. Tip number 7 is to start learning how to delegate as early as you can in your career. The reason I say as early as possible is because it is not an easy skill to learn. It takes a lot of time and a lot of practice, and you will get much better the more you do it. I mean, I'm still getting better each and every day in relation to delegation. The thing is, with delegation, it's not just about delegating, it's also about delegating well, knowing what things you should and should not delegate and what things you should do yourself. And through the 5 years I've worked in tax so far, I've kind of seen two extreme ends of delegation, where there's people who delegate absolutely everything, which I think is a mistake, and also people who delegate absolutely nothing, which is also a mistake. Some tasks are meant for delegating and some tasks are just not meant for delegating, and learning which ones to and which ones to not delegate is a skill in itself. The thing is, there's only so many hours in a day and so many things you can do within that time, and some tasks are just definitely not going to be worth your time, and if you don't delegate anything, then you're just going to end up working lots of hours, very hard, becoming stressed, your own enemy, and probably not having a work-life balance that you want. So learning how to delegate well, which tasks to delegate, which tasks to not delegate, are all super important. I do understand though why some people find it hard to pass tasks on. They may want to retain control, feel like they can do a better job themselves, or that it actually ends up taking more time to delegate the work than it would be to just do it yourself. But that kind of misses part of the point of delegation, because it is also very helpful for helping people to develop, because by delegating something you are giving maybe less experienced colleagues or more junior staff a chance to try out a new task and develop their skills, which in turn is going to make them more useful for the team. I actually covered delegation in episode 5 of the podcast, which is called How to Be a Better Delegator, with Mike Clayton. And Mike Clayton gave loads of great tips in that episode on delegation in general and just how to become better at it. So if you head on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP5, you can take a listen to that episode and get a head start in delegation. Tip number 8 is that if you are working in practice rather than in-house, start thinking about how you might win work as early as possible in your career. And to be honest, I can't quite believe that I'm now giving this as a tip, because it is something that I really wasn't keen on earlier on in my career, because to be honest it just felt scary. I didn't really have any idea where I would start with it, and used to think marketing, you can market things, but other than that I really had no idea. And that's kind of why it's important to start thinking and learning about this as early as you can, because if you're going to want to keep progressing within a career in practice, then there's going to come a point where you're going to be expected to win work, and if you don't, you won't be able to progress, generally speaking, past a certain grade. A place to start would be to get yourself involved in some of the processes and some of the ways that your firm currently goes about winning work, whether that's through having a business development team, having certain campaigns, whether it's about building strong relationships with clients, whatever it may be. If you can get involved in that earlier on in your career, you're going to get yourself ahead of the game and in a good position for when you actually need to start winning work in order to take your career further. I should probably just clarify that when I'm talking about winning work, I'm not necessarily just talking about winning a new client. It might be winning work from someone who's currently a client or someone who has been a client in the past. So some of the best ways that I've seen for winning work is to build strong relationships with clients and potential clients. Think of offerings that are beneficial for your target clients, not beneficial for you. But just a word of caution, marketing, although helpful, is generally not the best way to actually go out there and physically win a piece of work. You need to be a bit more direct than that. Maybe that's sending a direct email to someone, maybe it's a call or a meeting set up try not to hide under marketing. It's easier said than done, because creating a lovely looking flyer and sending that out to thousands of people is much easier than, say, calling 100 people to talk about something instead. But that latter option is going to be much more successful for winning work. So the earlier you can start learning about winning work, and the more you can start practicing some of the skills you need to win work, the better. Tip number 9. Get as much feedback as you can and always strive for improvement. One of the biggest influences for my progression has definitely been getting useful critical feedback to help me to improve, and having a growth mindset to actually think that I can learn from everyone around me and every experience that I have. Feedback is such an invaluable tool for helping you to progress and develop. And if you can learn how to get good feedback and take advantage of it, you're well on your way for progressing your career very quickly, at least in my opinion. Anyway, you can literally learn from everyone who's around you, whether they're more senior or less senior than you, and it's just about looking for those opportunities, asking for people's thoughts and opinions on things, asking for direct feedback on something that you've done. And another way to go about improving yourself is to go out of your comfort zone, because this is just a great way of accelerating a learning experience. But because obviously going out of your comfort zone is going to make you feel uncomfortable, it's not something that you're going to want to do too often, because it could end up making you miserable or unhappy or not enjoying the job. But trying to go out your comfort zone maybe 1 or 2 times a week will really help you to get better at something quickly. And one of the things for me for going out of my comfort zone is actually just calling up clients or prospects that I don't actually know that well. I would always rather revert to an email or a message instead of talking to someone directly that I don't know that well. But by going out of my comfort zone and calling up people more and forcing myself to do it, it's become much easier for me over time. And I'm sure you've got plenty of examples for yourself where you know that if you do something particular, then you're going to be going out of your comfort zones. Maybe that's giving presentations, maybe that's taking a look in a piece of tax legislation to try and find an answer, maybe it's trying to articulately and clearly write something down in writing. Whatever it is, try to go out of your comfort zone 1 or 2 a week. One of the reasons you should always strive for improvement, at least in my opinion, is because as you progress and as you become more senior, your role is going to change from the role you have now. You're going to do less of certain things, you're going to start doing more of others, and maybe even start doing things that you didn't actually do before in a new role. And so striving to get better and learn from experiences, learn from situations, is going to help you to do these new jobs that your job evolves into when the time comes. And also then, if you've had a lot of practice of improving yourself and getting better, then if there's anything new that you need to learn for a particular job, you're going to find that much easier. Just very quickly, coming back to feedback, episode 3 of the podcast is actually all about how you can go about obtaining good quality feedback that's going to be useful for you and to help you improve yourself, your skills and your career. So if you can head on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP3, you can take a listen to that episode and get some great tips about how you can get better feedback. Tip number 10. Only just realised that this is actually the final tip, so we've got a nice round number. Complete fluke with that, but there you go. Tip number 10 is to build good quality relationships with clients, prospects, colleagues, others who work in tax, literally anyone. Build good quality relationships. Everyone must have heard the cliche saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And whilst there is some truth in that, I think it's even more true and better to have good quality relationships rather than just having lots of relationships, because it's those ones that are good quality that are going to bear the best fruit in the long term. So when talking to people, you don't just need to talk about work things, try to find out something more about the people you're speaking to. Try to find a common interest or some similarities between you, because that will help you to build a deeper, stronger relationship than you would if you didn't do those things. Having strong relationships will help you in so many ways. If it's with colleagues or others who work in tax, then it's going to be helpful from a career progression and opportunities perspective for future jobs. From the aspects with prospects and clients, it's going to help you win work, because if you have that better relationship with someone, that could be the difference between them choosing you over someone else, particularly if they enjoy working with you and they know that you do a good job of something. I kind of always knew that relationships was going to be important throughout my career, but kind of didn't appreciate how important that was going to be, particularly from the clients and prospects perspective. I didn't even think that it would be useful from that perspective. I did from the opportunities and the progression perspective, but not the other way. So it really is helpful in lots of ways. And just in terms of building relationships, one thing that I can say is try not to be scared or afraid to speak to people who are more senior than you, whether that's within the organisation you work in or maybe even a client, because that was something that I definitely did have a bit of fear of at some points, because I felt like they were really important people and I didn't want to say anything stupid or wrong. And at the end of the day, just remember that they are also humans, and that whilst they may be important in their role, they ultimately are still a human as well. So don't be afraid or scared to speak to people. You know, if they don't want to speak to you, they can make that clear. Don't need to add that barrier into your own head before someone else puts that barrier there for you. Last tip around building relationships is try not to hide behind an email, because I think that can be a mistake, especially in some circumstances. So let's say a client isn't happy or is a bit upset about something. If you send an email, that might irritate them more. They can't get the feeling or the tone of voice or the way something is said from an email. I mean, you've probably been on the end of an email that's come across as sharp, or maybe you interpreted incorrectly to what the person who sent it to you intended, because that is the problem with email. There is no tone. You don't know how someone said something. You just get the words, and sometimes you can get the wrong impression from that. Show notes for this episode can be found at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPPX and replace X with the episode number. There's links within the show notes to episode 3 of the podcast, which is in relation to feedback, and episode 5, which is in relation to delegation. And also, if you're interested in subscribing to the podcast to get notification of when new episodes are released, and also of anything else such as the free email course to create your professional development plan, you can head on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/subscribe, and you can sign up to email notifications there. So if you only do one thing out of this episode, then I recommend that you decide on and understand what your USP is, because that is going to be something that can help set you apart and be a great selling point for you personally in the future. But that's it for this episode. I hope you found the episode useful and have taken away some useful points that you can use to help improve and develop your tax career. Until next time.